Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we provide a daily view on the world markets and global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Coming up today, a unique adaptation of Israeli startup Mapme, and Canadians elect a new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Let's start now with the headlines. Well, Asian markets traded mixed on Tuesday as they digested another decline in oil prices. Japan's Nikkei advanced 0.42%, the Hang Seng slipped 0.37%, and the Shanghai moved up 1.11%. The oil slump was also a drag on European equities, opening flat and then dipping into the red. For the afternoon, London's FTSE was trading down 0.19%, Germany's DAX lower 0.25%, and France's CAC also fell 0.83%. U.S. futures indicated a slightly lower open. Canadians voted in a new Prime Minister on Monday, Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau. The Liberal Party also won a majority of Parliament's 338 seats. Canada's Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's reputation on economic affairs has suffered recently, largely in part because of the economic slump driven by lower commodities prices, and as a result, Canada's economy contracting the first half of the year. Well, newcomer Justin Trudeau faces the task now of injecting new life into the economy, most likely in the form of government spending. Melinda Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, visited Mexico City on Monday for the Global Maternal Newborn Health Conference. There she addressed ways to meet development goals established by the UN for children and women. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is the world's largest private philanthropy organization with a $40 billion endowment.
Better health leads to better education, which leads to better economic opportunities, which leads to broader prosperity for communities and countries.
Well, U.S. President Barack Obama announced on Monday that a total 81 companies, including Alcoa and GE, have backed a U.S.-sponsored pledge supporting action against climate change. The president is said to be pushing private sector support ahead of the UN conference at the end of November, and more corporations are expected to join. Signatories already include a variety of U.S. firms, from Bank of America to Walmart, as well as Coca-Cola. Well, earlier this year, Obama unveiled his Clean Power Plan, which is aimed to cut carbon emissions from the energy sector by more than a third by year 2030.
We need to have a partnership between business and the federal government, state government, local government, non-for-profit sector, all to continue to achieve aggressive reductions in our carbon footprint here in the United States as America as a leader.
Mexico and Cuba's foreign ministers met in Havana on Monday in a bid to strengthen economic ties between the nations. In recent years, relations have been warm, most notably after Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto came back to power in 2011. Unlike the previous leader, conservative Vicente Fox, who had a series of spats with Cuba's Fidel Castro. Well, according to a press release issued by the Mexican Foreign Ministry, Mexican entrepreneurs and investors are seeking opportunities in fields as varied as the sciences to the arts.
We recognize in Mexico a country with which we have a very intense relationship. We are prepared to increase economic trade and commercial relations.
Well, in earnings news, IBM revenue fell more than expected on Monday. The world's largest tech services firm also cut its profit forecast. This is the 14th quarter in a row that the U.S. tech giant has posted a reduction in revenue. Shares of IBM fell 4.8% in after-hours trading to $141.95. Much like rivals Oracle and Microsoft, IBM is now shifting away from hardware to the cloud. And China continues to remain a worry for investors as they weigh the economic health of the world's #2 economy. According to new calculations by the U.S. Treasury, capital outflows from China topped $500 billion in the first 8 months of this year, another example of the world's shifting fortunes. Well, the outflows from China peaked at some $200 billion during the steep market plunges back in August. Well, now for insight on China as well as the world markets, we are joined by Andy Bush, a financial markets expert in Chicago. Thank you again very much for being with us as always.
My pleasure, Natalie.
Well, Beijing released official growth of 6.9% in the third quarter. Can we trust that number?
No, I don't think you can, and here's why. I mean, just logically, look at the last three numbers that they released. 7, 7, 6.9, and the official government target is 7.1. There's variation in these numbers. If you look at the United States, you don't have numbers that are that close together at any time. I mean, you just don't. So on the surface, you can tell something's wrong here. There's a lot of other reasons. I don't need to go into them at this point, but the markets have finally figured out that China's numbers are fabricated. We are not sure exactly what they are. They're not 7%. They're somewhere south of 5% would be my guess.
Wow, that's quite a steep discrepancy there. What about your view on stocks overall in light of the situation?
Yeah, I think we saw a tremendous amount of volatility in August, and what happened was that between August and September, we really saw the adjustment in expectations of what the markets were going to do this year. We saw a dramatic drop in the number of companies that were a dramatic drop in the number of companies that were above their 200-day moving average, almost to an extreme low of there were only 20% of companies above their 200-day moving average. This has only occurred at about 6 times over the last 30 years. And what's interesting, Natalie, is every time that's occurred, you've seen subsequent rallies of significant size going from 5.5% in the first 3 months after that to 12.5% over the next 6 months. And then for the 12 months total, it's 17.4% on average. So I think we've seen the low for the U.S. stocks at this point, and going forward, they should hold up pretty well now.
All right. And what about the ECB?
The ECB is in a really interesting place. They're starting to look a lot more like the Federal Reserve in the sense that you're getting different members saying different things that are moving the markets. Last week, we had someone say that we have to rethink how much quantitative easing they're doing. This week, they're backing that down. Neuer came out and said they've calibrated quantitative easing correctly. So we've seen pretty big moves in the euro. It seems to be stabilizing, but for this week on Thursday when they meet, we don't expect them to change their quantitative easing. But again, the volatility that's created by the commentary from ECB members is really what's creating problems for investors.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your updates. Very much appreciate it here.
My pleasure.
Well, it is now time for our Startup Nation segment here on the Economy program, where we offer a special look at some of Israel's most promising startups. We spoke with this 22-year-old founder just yesterday. On set, we are joined by Ben Langde, Mapme co-founder and CEO. People all around the country now have been depressed about the recent spat of terrorist attacks, dubbed the Intifada of Knives. In response, Ben's platform, Mapme, has seen a unique adaptation, with ordinary Israeli citizens using it to get a clear geographical understanding of where and when these attacks are occurring. Ben, thank you very much for joining us today on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us first, let's start at the beginning. What is Mapme?
So Mapme is a platform that we provide to organizations to build what we call smart maps.
All right.
Yeah, basically we have different organizations using it to build all kinds of different maps of different things happening, communities, ecosystems.
And what are some examples of that?
So one example, the latest example is Stand With Us using it to build a map of all the terror attacks in Israel.
Right.
And we have publishers using it to map their articles. We have startup organizations around the world using it to map startups in their cities. We have the Ministry of Culture in the UK using it to create maps of things related to culture happening there. So it's really diverse, and basically you can do anything you want with it.
All right. Well, you're only 22. And for many of us, that is still quite young. How is it that you managed to create this company that's already raised $1 million?
So I started as a side project while I was serving in the Army, and it was originally just a project that I started that was mapping the Israeli tech ecosystem. It was called Mapped in Israel. And what happened with that was people started reaching out asking if they could create similar maps but of all kinds of different things. And that's really where the idea came from, just the demand and the people asking for it. So I got a bit of a head start, working on it as a side project, and then eventually raising money after I finished the Army.
All right. And so what happened here with this latest spat of violence that we've seen people just just on their own took their own initiative to create this map? Has it been helpful?
No, so each map has an organization behind it, or a publisher, or a business. So in this case, it was Stand With Us. They're an organization promoting, or showing what's happening in Israel. So they're the ones who took the initiative to create this map, and they're the ones who are adding content to it, showing which attacks are happening, where and when. And people can also add things if there's missing information. They can also add it, and then it goes through their approval.
All right. Well, where do you expect to take this business over the next year or two?
So right now our focus is on getting as many maps as possible and many organizations using it to be creating these maps. And eventually what we want to do is we want to build sort of a network of all these maps and of this data that we're collecting and making it more of a consumer-facing app that people can use to search and find information.
And how do you foresee that in the future we'll be able to generate revenue?
I think that once we get to the point where we have enough, data and places and maps built on our platform, and we have enough people using it, I think there'll be a bunch of different ways to make money from that, whether it's advertising or an affiliate model. I think there are a bunch of different ways we'll be able to do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
After almost a decade in power, Canada's Conservative Party is out. The Liberal Party is in. The soaring economy is largely attributed to helping relative newcomer Justin Trudeau into Canada's top job.
Canadians have elected a Liberal government, a result that we have accepted without hesitation.
Congratulations and a somewhat bitter taste. After 9.5 years serving as Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper's Conservative government lost the election to the young Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau on Monday. Trudeau won with a majority government, gaining 180 seats out of the 340 that make up the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa. Thanks to the majority win, Trudeau, at just 43 years of age, has been elected as the country's next Prime Minister.
Canadians have spoken. You want a government with a vision and an agenda for this country that is positive and ambitious and hopeful. Well, my friends, I promise you tonight that I will lead that government.
Trudeau gives hope, especially to the middle class. During his campaign, he promised to reduce their taxes by increasing those of the upper class. More generally, he promised to revive the economy through job creation and a vast program for infrastructure. During the first 6 months of 2015, Canada's GDP contracted 0.8% in the first quarter and 0.5% between April and June of this year. The reason being the decline of prices of raw materials. The country is a major exporter of goods, particularly of oil. But despite the complexity of these challenges, Justin Trudeau does not seem frightened. If his political career is cut short, the young politician already has had a busy life, with a degree in English literature and educational sciences, as well as many different types of jobs under his belt. But above all, he observed his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, in the same place as him 30 years ago.
Well, welcome to the 1980s.
And for the stories we didn't want you to miss, on set we have Daniel Roth. So what'd you bring today?
Well, first story is the ongoing battle and divergence between theaters and computer watching of movies. These are kind of the two big trends that are happening now. On one hand, you have huge summer blockbusters like Jurassic World that just broke all the records, took in something like $1.5 billion alone. You have the Marvel movies, just two, the Avengers 2 and Ant-Man took in $2 billion together. These are huge, huge movies. Okay, that's on one hand. On the other hand, you have the Netflix era. People watching things for the first time on Netflix on their computers, sometimes on TVs, but rarely in the theaters. So Beasts of No Name, which is a movie about child soldiers, was bought by Netflix, and they had originally wanted to release it in theaters, but theaters are actually boycotting it because Netflix has started to take away a lot of the theater-going audience.
Oh, that's fascinating. And do you know the numbers who tends to do better if they go the traditional way or the Netflix way?
Well, it's really divergent now. Right now, it looks like movies that are escapist tend to do well in theaters, things that are totally fantastical, where, Jurassic World, Ant-Man, sort of, post-apocalyptic space movies, things like that. At the same, Beasts of No Name, this is a film that is, first of all, a $6 million budget versus a $200 million budget. But it's also a film about child soldiers. It's based on reality. It's the opposite of escapist. And it seems like, first of all, people go to the theaters to escape, and they watch on their computer for things that they want to watch, information they want to get, often documentaries. So the content really, really matters.
All right, so the more informative you go, you turn to Netflix, and the more escapist and fantastical, you go to the movie theater?
That seems like one of the trends out there.
All right. Any other trends in that area?
Well, so, I think one of the things we're seeing is there is a place for theater films. You're seeing, again, post-apocalyptic, the Mad Max movie, the space movies, Chris Nolan's recent space movie, Interstellar. These were theater movies. Everyone said, you have to see this in the theater, and they did incredibly in the box office. And that was the big deal. On the, on the Netflix side, again, you can watch almost anything on your computer, but some of these big movies have to be watched in the theater to really enjoy them.
And something also you can watch on your computer is i24 News.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Daniel Roth from Media Watch. That wraps up our show today. Stay tuned here every day for all your global business coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you.